Good afternoon, everyone. This is a South African Bar Association presentation. As you are aware, the South African Bar Association has a weekly event at no cost to the participants to improve the skill set of the legal profession. We hope to reach a wide spectrum of the legal profession, from advocates and attorneys to students. This initiative is aimed at making a fundamental contribution to developing the skill set of all and any persons who represent the South African public in our courts. It is my honor and privilege to be asked by Advocate Bart Ford and Jasat to introduce our eminent speaker today. Our speaker today is Advocate Aslam Bava, SC, currently a member at the Dumanakwe Group. By way of providing a brief background, and I emphasize brief because I cannot do justice to his successes in the legal profession in the time that I have, and if I tried to do so, we would use up all our allocated time. Advocate Bava, apart from being a renowned SC, has been appointed to various panels and arbitration committees, and basically has made a fundamental contribution in his long illustrious career to the legal profession. To give you a few examples, on a voluntary basis, he has chaired the AFSA training division. He is a constitutional law expert, he's a renowned arbitrator and mediator. He's an expert in mediation law, to mention but a few of his successes. He's a member of the Shanghai 14. To his credit, he appears on behalf of a number of religious organizations on a pro amico basis. He's going to speak to us today on the topic of understanding the basic requirements of successful advocacy. Once again, it is my pleasure to ask you, Advocate Bava, to give this address today, and I now hand over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that very, very flattering introduction. I'm not sure that I'm deserving of all the accolades, but be that as it may, I want to thank you very much. Just want to commend Bart Ford and the organization for having this enthusiastic display and the enthusiasm that I saw when Bart spoke to me yesterday, asking me to participate in this workshop. And why I say participate and not present is I believe learning is a two-way street. And as much as you may learn from me, I will also most certainly learn from you. Today, my topic that I have for you, and I'm going to do it by way of slide presentations, is in terms of the successful advocacy. And Bart and I were talking yesterday, and I said, the most important thing for me is to talk about aspects that relate to going back to basics. And going back to basics is fundamental. I'm going to start with sharing and working through a slide presentation that I did. And I don't have I don't have sharing rights. So if we could now, sorry, I think somebody's, my participation, it's not allowing me to share my screen. So I wonder if there's someone who could just, the administrator, if you could just allow me to share my screen. Okay, okay, so today I think I've just got somebody who's talking over, hasn't muted their mic. So perhaps. Just trying to.
Coco.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, Advocate Bava.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to ask everyone other than Advocate
Have a good
Bava
long weekend.
to mute their
Angas,
mic.
ni nani on Monday. Bye. Bye, books.
Sanako, please mute your microphone.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
No problem. Okay, that was a lively conversation, and I think I'll continue from here. So the first element that I've got is in terms of, can you all see the screen, by the way, that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
in a council we can.
We can.
Yes.
All right, so successful advocacy and understanding the basics. What is crucial for us to understand, and I think why I'm starting with this particular area in terms of basics is I think that this is, and I spoke to Bart, I said it, I don't think it would be a one session that will do justification, because we've got an hour within which to discuss this aspect. So what are we talking about in terms of understanding, or back to the basics? How do we as legal practitioners, I'm told I presented, I worked on this presentation on the basis that I understood that there would be only advocates, but we are all legal practitioners. And so they are attorneys, and they may also be legal advisors and advocates involved here. So just excuse my presentation where it specifically mentions advocates. Now, very fundamental, you'll see on the screen that I've put up a question is, who are you? And why this question is crucial and fundamental is many people pick this question very late in their practice because they haven't defined themselves. And when they don't define themselves, they enter into an area where they are very confused about how and where their practice should be going to. And here particularly, this basic element is the first question that we ask here is, how would you describe yourself in one word? And this is a fundamental question. And answering this basic question will help you develop. Why is this crucial? It is crucial because if you define, there's still somebody making noise there. If you define yourself, I'm not sure who's not muted here. Okay, I'm going to just try and continue. So if the administrator can please deal with whenever somebody is making a noise, just to mute them. Oh. Okay, I'm back. Thank you very much. The fundamental point is that when you ask yourself these fundamental questions as to who you are and how would you describe yourself in one word, I want you all just to take some time and think about it. And very often, the answer is a name. And somebody would say, well, I'm Aslam. But what does that fundamentally mean? And I'm talking in terms of your profession and a bigger question than that. Because when we drill down, you will find that this becomes something that defines your outlook in terms of your legal practice. It becomes your outlook because it is your worldview. And it could be a very confining element if you define yourself very restrictively. Now, this question is an existential question in a certain sense, but it is also a question that influences your daily interactions with people. So if you are to define yourself as an advocate, or an attorney, you will invariably find that you will be going home cross-examining your entire family or friends. And how does this work? You will not accept any question because in your mind you have defined yourself as an advocate or an attorney or a lawyer. And if you decide to expand that element in terms of your own definition of who you are, you will find the effect that it has, and a very liberating effect in terms of your practice as a lawyer. If you define yourself as a human being that has various different skill sets, which may include hobbies such as gardening or fishing or playing soccer or netball, then you will find that you are a multidimensional individual. And this feeds in to your psyche when you are dealing with legal aspects. It is a fundamental and basic understanding that if you define yourself restrictively, you will have a restrictive output. So, for example, a 10-year-old person comes to you with a suggestion which may be life-changing. But because you define yourself as being this lawyer that listens to no one else but your legal textbooks, your precedents from law, and that this 10-year-old child in your mind has nothing to add to your life, you rob yourself of that. So very important in dealing with very basic elements in our practices is to ensure and to look at how you start defining yourself. Then, how do you see an advocate, or in this case, like I said, a lawyer, an attorney? Picture your ideal lawyer. And in your mind, what is the picture that you have of this ideal lawyer? And is that lawyer someone with whom you identify to such an extent that you want to be as that lawyer in every form, meaning physically, meaning materially, meaning intellectually, and meaning spiritually? So when I say spiritually, I mean in this sense that that person may exude a certain type of attitude which you find appealing. Now, when you picture this person, this ideal lawyer, what does that lawyer do? And this is where you have to look at the aspect of emulating and looking very closely at what the person does. Understand that lawyers, like all human beings, are multifaceted. So a person may be very successful in the legal practice, but emotionally and spiritually and financially may not be the best. So when you find a person that you want to emulate, establish what the person is successful in, but do not then generalize on behalf of that personality. And seek to emulate that which is the successful element, but not every other element, which may not be as successful. And how does that lawyer present herself? What do you admire about this lawyer? And once you start defining this area, you start finding that there's a convergence of two areas, that is understanding who you are, which was the first portion, and now finding out what you like to be like and perhaps exceed, because once you start finding that you're emulating a person, law, as you will see in the next slides as we go along, is a development of an individual where you develop your own styles. You become your own me, which is perhaps greater than the person you wanted to emulate. But that is a stepping stone towards where you are going to. And what makes a successful advocate? Now that you go into two areas, these are not small areas, the first two aspects that I raised. The first one relates to who and finding out what your understanding is of who you are, how you define yourself in this world. And the second one is what your goal is at this stage and who you wish to seek to emulate. Then what makes a successful lawyer? And this is where it is firstly back to basics. That is crucial. And coming back to basics every time, that is a foundational element. So whether it is drafting of pleadings, whether it is interviewing witnesses, whether it is examining or cross-examining in court, you need to stick to basics. Don't go out on a limb unless you have, and until you have established your proper foundations. We will deal more with back to basics as we go along. The second element is hard work. Yes, there are opportunities and there are areas where you will be able to, as it were, people say, wing it. And that is true. It does happen, and it does happen more often than not. But the point is, there is the saying that the harder you work, the luckier you get. And that is sort of like a Lego building blocks or foundational building block aspect, where once you work hard at a particular project, you are able to then allow a connection at a higher level. So it is, if you are to take it like you are building a wall, if you were to try and reach a higher platform from the ground, you will not be able to. But once you build these, use these blocks to build up, and you want to reach that higher platform, you will be able to. So just as a description of how you can progress. But that the foundational element is hard work, and included in that is smart work. So you can sit and I often give the example of a person sitting and saying, I'm going to take a pick tomorrow and I'm going to start breaking, or a drill, and I'm going to start breaking this rock. And I'm going to find a diamond in this rock. That's what I'm looking for. And if this rock does not contain diamonds and is not a diamond-bearing rock, you can be working harder than everybody else, but you're not going to be successful. So working hard entails working smart. And the next aspect of what makes a successful advocate, and I think you all be pleased to know, is that when you start practicing, or at any stage that you are practicing, you would expect certain successes to befall you almost immediately. And that is a mistake we often make. It is not a sprint, but a marathon. And I was in court this morning where Judge Miller mentioned this again, and it struck me as being absolutely correct, that understand a few things. What you do now in terms of your legal practice, you may not understand that it will have an implication in the future. But it does, and it will have an impact. So whether you are slack at preparing now, or whether you try and cut shortcuts, or whether you do something that's not good or that's not permissible or is not something that you would be proud of, you will find that that aspect will come back and haunt you later in your practice. So do what is right, do what is correct, work hard, create an environment of which you are proud to present as yourself. And that is your projection to the world. Then the first aspect in dealing with all of that is to look at your professionalism. Now, you will see that there are 3 notes under the professionalism. And the first element relates to the first aspect, which we discussed, was how do you view yourself? And you need to have a professional attitude about yourself. So your professional attitude about yourself would be, if I make an appointment with somebody else and if they are late and keep me waiting, would I see that person as professional, or would that professionalism of that person diminish in my eyes? And if you ask that question of yourself and you're satisfied that you would not be sitting and waiting for somebody, then you do not make others wait for you. So your professional attitude about yourself will start informing how you treat others in terms of your professional outlook. So the work that you send out, your documentation, your pleadings, your discovery, your preparation for trial, all of that, you start finding that once you identify with a certain professional attitude, and that you keep on building this professional attitude within yourself without any snobbery or without any understanding that you are superior to anybody else, but simply to improve yourself and improve the quality around you, then you start finding that the professionalism in your work that you produce increases, because it is an expectation of yourself. This is what you expect of yourself and from yourself. So when you start building, you also start dealing with others in a professional manner. And you will know that as you deal with other people, there is the saying, if you are kind to somebody, you will receive kindness in return. If you start dealing with people in a professional manner, you will start receiving a professional attitude in return. So this area of developing your professionalism is a crucial element, but it begins with yourself. Then, what do we do as lawyers? What are we? And how do we, what do we do? And the issue is the first aspect that I've put down is we are wordsmiths. This is crucial. We are wordsmiths because we produce words and string them together so as to paint a particular picture. How do we produce these words? We produce these words either by way of our pleadings, which are documents, or by our memoranda, by our drafting of letters and opinions, advising our attorneys to draft or drafting ourselves letters. We produce words and we string these words together so that at the end of the day, we paint a particular picture. We are also articulators. We articulate what we want to get across. So we use these words, but not only written, verbal as well. So when you produce these words in court, in your opening address, court in your examination in chief, court in arguing a legal point, you are producing words as a wordsmith and articulating it in a fashion that will create the third element, that we are convincers. We seek to convince. So we seek to convince the judge or the opposite side in negotiations that of our view of a particular matter. And we therefore need to understand how to convince. You know, there is the saying that you can attract a bee with honey, but never with vinegar. And at times, you may have to convince and bite your tongue on certain aspects that you may want to express, but where it may not be wise to do so. So you are, in seeking to convince, also then come out to the next point, is that we are artists. Now, I know many of you might think, how are we artists? We use the canvas of pleadings and oratory to paint pictures. And this is a skill. It's a skill set, but it's also artistic. And you develop your own style. You develop your own style in terms of the memorandums, in terms of even keeping your chambers. And this is a fundamental aspect in terms of how we should be viewing ourselves, that it is something that we create that the world out there has to see and has to know our signature, that comes from you as an individual. We are intellectual. We rationalize using legal logic, and we seek to convince based on this legal logic. This may not be an exhaustive list, but it certainly encapsulates quite a bit of what we do and what we ought to be thinking of in doing as advocates or as lawyers. Then the next portion, how do we become the best that we can? And this is the first aspect, which may seem a bit too soapy. Believe in yourself. You've heard that a million times. But how often is it that where you walk into court, or that you're thinking of an opponent who may be stronger, that you stop believing in yourself and you allow fear to overtake you? This is an ingredient that is fundamental in creating an environment. Remember, there is a very big difference between arrogance and belief in the self. There's a big difference between conceit and a belief in yourself. A belief in yourself requires a confidence of a nature where you are able to retain your composure, to excel in the circumstances when you are called upon to articulate a position against a very much stronger opponent than yourself. Also, the second portion is to understand that no one is perfect. So how many times do we sit doubting ourselves and saying to ourselves, oh, I wish I had all of this. Those wishes are good. They are a motivational factor for you to go in and improve yourself. But do not be too hard on yourself. Do not expect yourself to be perfect. That doesn't mean that you mustn't excel. You must, in your mind, have an attitude of being the best and producing the best. But you also have to realize that there is room for error. That at times you are going to be your best, at times you may not be your best, and always sit back and analyze. The next aspect is strive to get a balance in life. How often do we see that people who commit themselves to a profession suddenly have no families, suddenly have no spiritual life, suddenly the financial aspect in life is compromised, or they do not spend enough time with themselves, looking after their health by exercising, looking after the mental faculties by reading books that may enrich them. So a balance in life is crucial. And these are fundamental aspects that you may not hear very often in terms of going back to basics. And the next one, a very good lesson, is listen twice as much as you speak. Remember, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So that gives you the equation. Listen twice as much as you speak, and you will learn a lot. You will learn from your environment. You will learn from what you hear and what you see in court. And listening is not only the auditory sense. When you are reading a case, listen to what argument you are reading. And I say listen in the sense that I'm not saying that you're reading it out loud, but understand the proposition. And in this sense, listen to what the judge is saying in the judgment. Then the next most fundamental, very fundamental point is understand how to use the basic tools of the trade. Now, this is an aspect that I would want to deal with in the next session. And this is, to me, on the presentation, the end of the workshop for today. Like I say, it is never goodbye. It is until we see each other again. So that, people, is, I'm going to stop the share on that to allow you perhaps to interact and to discuss. I don't know if it goes back to Bart and what the position is from here.
Are there any questions for Advocate Bava?
Yeah, perhaps I can ask a question, Senior Counsel. Can you hear me?
Sorry, yes, I've unmuted. I can hear you now.
It's Bart. Firstly, thank you. I think it was a lovely presentation, and we're looking forward to having you on again. I think the difficulty that most of us have, and I found myself in a position where you do get to court and find that you have an opponent whom you assess to be much stronger in you and you are than you, and then you sort of feel as if you second guess yourself. And how does one then overcome that? Because that may very well be a reality that all of us faces, especially when junior counsel come up against senior counsel. And it doesn't help if the senior counsel is even taller than you and looks down upon you. If you can just share some ideas on that, please.
Sure. So the first idea is that never accept fully what other people say about other people. So, for example, they will say to you that this is the best advocate on earth. Don't accept that, because that is most probably not true. When you come across, and this is where you develop your own skills at home, and individually within yourself. When you come across an opponent who is much stronger, and let us take your example, Bart. We now have a junior coming into court not knowing who the opponent is going to be. It will be very rare that you will come across a silk not knowing who your opponent is going to be, because of the processes in terms of which practice notes and what have we. But let's assume it's an urgent application. You going into court and you now come across and the opponent is a well-known silk, and you now have to argue the case. At this stage, you have got a few options. The first, the first aspect I would suggest is gather yourself. Ask yourself a fundamental question. What am I here for? And that is a very, very important question. Your answer to that must invariably be, I'm here to argue a particular case. And when you ask and answer that particular question, your next question is, what is my preparation on this case, and your focus at that stage must not be on your opponent. Forget your opponent. Concentrate on what you have. So concentrate on your case and concentrate on how you're going to be presenting. Let that person, your senior counsel, your opponent, who is a well-known silk, deal with his case as he goes along or she goes along. Don't concern yourself. You know, there's a saying that says that what people think of you is none of your business. And I think if you apply that sort of thinking, saying what I will think of the silk is actually none of his business and neither is it my business. You know, there is the other saying that you are only as good as your last case. So look at your preparation, garner your resources, and make sure that your concentration and your focus is to deliver what you came to deliver. And you will see a great change, because as opposed to concentrating on an individual who may be on that particular day having a bad day. So you may have a silk who is well known, but who may not have even prepared himself or herself. And your fear makes you perform at below your par. And when that silk produces at a level that is low as well, you would want to go home and kick yourself and say, but I, should have done better. And you can do better if you keep your focus. Bart, I hope that's answered your question.
Thank you. In fact, it did. I'm sure there might be other questions that others may want to ask. So I'll leave it to AJ and to Graham, who's facilitating the session.
Council, next question is from me. Thank you so much for your time. Just to add on to Bart and to yours and to your remarks, there's a very good saying that's by Chief Justice Mogoeng, which states that I do not suffer from affirmation addiction. And I think that's applicable in what you're saying now. My question pertaining, emanating from Bart is obviously the judiciary is in a process of transformation, and we understand that. But the transformation has not indeed happened as at the pace that it should. What is your opinion on that?
Yes, certainly the transformation has not occurred at the pace that, we're sitting now over 20 years in our democracy, and we ought to have had a much more transformed bench. But those are aspects that are being dealt with. They are being dealt with at a pace slower than most people would like. I can't really comment on whether at what pace it ought to have been. But what I can very safely say is that the bench should have been transformed at a much earlier stage, and we would have been further in terms of our judiciary and our jurisprudence in developing a jurisprudence that is, if you want to use a term, more friendly to the development of this country.
Thank you, Council. Any further questions?
I see their hands up, and yes.
Yes, Advocate Bava, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And your session was very, very informative. I would just like your opinion, Advocate. I, being a young junior counsel that started off practice this year, I see many of my peers around me being very with a lack of motivation, obviously due to the economic times, not getting any briefs and any work coming through. What advice would you give them just to lift their spirits and give them some hope going forward? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Yes, it is a very, very difficult situation, especially if you are a junior. coming into the profession and finding yourself caught with the COVID environment, where your interaction with colleagues, your appearances in court, on the physical level, have all been compromised. Not only that, we've been having a discussion in our group relating to the fact that many of the times now judges will want to not hear or not see you in court, or even have a video conference, or exclude juniors in the sense that they indicate that they will be determining the matter on the papers before them, and there is no need for oral presentation. So even if you have a silk who's going to be leading you in a particular matter, once a judge makes that ruling, the junior falls away, because the attorney and client say, well, then there's no need for a junior because there's no oral presentation, and that may deprive juniors of 1 to 2 to 3 days fees in terms of preparation, appearance, what have we. What I can say is that it is a very difficult situation, and nobody can give you the exact remedy for this. But I think what we need to do is we need to understand two fundamental aspects of our practice. Our practice is, on the one hand, a professional element where we are, as lawyers, producing professional services. On the other hand, and simultaneously with that, it is not just an isolated area of our existence as lawyers. It is intertwined with a commercial reality, and that is that the second portion of our practice, which is a business. And so concentration on either one overly will lead to a diminishing of the concentration on the other. So if you concentrate too much on just your professional output, but you're not concerned about collecting fees, for example, you end up not being able to pay your rental, not being able to afford to pay your bonds, and not being able to afford to sustain yourself financially. And on the other hand, if you're too involved financially, then you go into court and you have not exercised you have not used your skills to develop your professional abilities. And so that suffers. So there needs to be a balance between the two. So that is the one. The second element that I would look at on a practical level is to start perhaps some sort of communal working together, for juniors to sit together and say, and it is going to be very difficult because by its nature, it's competitive. But they has to, at some stage, say, we need to sit together, we need to develop a network. And if I can't do this application on this particular day, within the network, I will pass it on to somebody else. And the first port of call would then be for you to, within your groupings, to start strengthening your groupings. So you will find sometimes that people don't pay particular attention to this, and they start working on a matter, and an attorney phones them and says, look, can you appear in this application next week? And you say, sorry, I'm not available. As opposed to saying this to the attorney, would you mind if I call you back in a few minutes? I might have a solution for you. I'm not available, but I will have a solution for you. And then to go to your network of juniors and to speak to somebody and to find out who's available, and then to make a suggestion to the attorney, if you counsel, to say to them, look, I'm not available. Here's a colleague of mine who will do an equally good job. If you're, obviously you will be satisfied with that, and you must be when you're making that reference. And then to try and pass work amongst you. And then the additional aspect is to work as a group towards in marketing your services. So if you're marketing it towards the attorneys, to find your target market and to start making sure that the message is going out there, that you are marketing yourself and that they do find the path to your chambers so that the briefs can start flowing. The briefing patterns are very skewed, as we know, and that needs to be resolved and sorted out. But if you do this as a concerted effort in very many ways as a corporation, and you can take it as a corporation of juniors, you could start developing a very strong basis of work inflows.
Claudia, I see there's a question from you.
Yes, I just wanted to know, how do you keep yourself in check or grounded, especially when you're climbing the ranks of the profession? Because it's easy to lose yourself and become arrogant, let's say. So what do you do that keeps you grounded?
Okay, I'm going to try. So it is a very difficult process because remember, the aspect of being professional and at the same time financial in terms of your practice as you're developing is that it actually jars against your ego and it develops a huge ego. So you then start engaging in developing your intellectual acumen and your knowledge base of specialized areas. And with that comes a thought in your head continuously that, well, if somebody's talking and they don't know this field, well, that person doesn't know what they're talking. And you could go to saying, okay, that person is rubbish or is talking rubbish or is, doesn't know what they're talking about. And that may be correct. But I think what grounds people is to my mind, number one, do not venture into areas of generalizations. So if you've taught yourself in a particular area, do not generalize. As I mentioned earlier in the talk, when you're generalizing about somebody else, the other problem is we generalize about ourselves. If you have acquired a huge skill and you have been given a gift of, for example, memory and remember cases or whatever, that must not consume your mind as being a more or a person that is superior to another person in every other field. I mean, how often do you find that a person who may not even be educated and a CEO sitting where, for example, the person who is, when we say not educated, I say not schooled, because I believe every person gets educated in life. Schooling is different. So that CEO may be earning a high salary, and suddenly this person who has not been schooled suddenly comes up with an idea that makes that person a multi-billionaire. Now, to understand in life that when you have gifts, you may have one gift in a particular area of your life, but you are not gifted in every area. Yes, you have raised the bar, and you raise the bar in your inquiry, in your general knowledge, in your specific knowledge, but you need to keep yourself checked by telling yourself that you are not an expert in every field in life. And there are people who are better and there are people who are lesser than you. So you are walking that journey. Then there are those people who are spiritual, who may believe in whatever. You may believe whatever your belief is. You need to understand that you are an accountable being, that you are a being that receives certain gifts in life. So, for example, even if you are preparing for a case, you could suddenly get a huge element, of sickness which is beyond your control. And once you start saying and understanding that you are not the ultimate master of your being, and that means the intellectual being, the physical being, and your spirit. I don't want to use the word spiritual because I'm distinguishing it from being religious. So spirit, if you find and you keep yourself in check by saying those things to yourself continuously, that yes, I'm developing, and the biggest element, I think, from all of that is then to develop also the attitude of gratitude. And the attitude of gratitude is to continuously be thankful for what you have received and thankful for what you are able to produce, but without always thinking that that element that you are able to produce as an output as a human being, that allows you to dominate over any other person, whether it's by an emotional, whether it's by words, whether it's by whatever. So that would be one. And the next one is to make sure that you develop the element of kindness and courtesy within yourself. That to me would be the mixture that I would suggest.
Thank you very much. That was lovely.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council.
Afternoon.
Yes, I'm Sanele CBC.
Hello, Sanele.
Yes, I just want to know one aspect here. Are there any platforms whereby advocates can come up and maybe air their concerns with regards to how things are done? Why I'm saying this? I'm saying this particularly because I'm a junior. I just commenced practice, but I see that in this profession, a lot of our judicial officers, apart from the directives that exist, but they've got their own directives. And I feel that that causes so much confusion at times, so to say, because if maybe we were to have one consolidated like we're having, and then each judge doesn't come up with their own directives, it will help save time and help save clients, because at the end of the day, we find that practitioners do not comply because of the fact that they might have missed one aspect with regards to each judge's directive. So what I want to know is, are there any platforms where, you know, advocates can come and maybe try and share ideas, not necessarily to criticize, but maybe to come and say, if maybe we were to do things like this, it would not be denial of access to justice, access to courts.
Yes. So, Sanele, you raised some interesting points. I'm going to break it up into two separate aspects. The first is the determination by individual judges of how the processes in their courts work. And the aspect that is fundamental to understand is that the judge is the dominant person in his or her court. And so each judge has, as each individual has different requirements. So there would be a judge who would be more prone to allowing, for example, a laxity on indexing and paginating. And there would be another judge who would be absolutely strict on that. Then there would be a judge who would require certain pre-application or pre-trial procedures to be done, and another judge would be lax about that. So that aspect cannot be controlled by us. What I like about the second aspect, which you are suggesting, is where do we come together and how do we come together in creating an environment where we can discuss this and put this forward, because it is a nightmare. You, Sanele, I don't know whether you've practiced in many courts outside Pretoria and Johannesburg, but if you go down to Durban, they've got their own rules. If you go down to Cape Town, they've got very different rules. If you go to Bloemfontein, they've got very different rules there too. And then if you go to Limpopo, Polokwane, you'll find different rules. So apart from just getting judges who may be here in Pretoria and Johannesburg, you then find it also on the national level. The idea would be twofold. One is to get a database of how each court's rules work. And then the second element is to create a group structure, which you have. And that is very important. We must use our group structures, where if this is an area, you need to get people of like-minded concerns to be able to sit together in your group and to find out a way of starting to deal with that. So let's assume that you need to approach a particular judge, and if you link to the Johannesburg Bar, obviously you do it through the Bar Council. If you're not, then you'll do it on an independent forum, but you use your group structure and the highest echelons in your group structure who are able to make representations on your behalf to perhaps start having regular meetings with the judges and to express your concerns. So there are aspects where, or there are committees that are set up, which are called court committees, and which meet very regularly with judges. And through these court committees, you can then ask judges to try and get a uniform system going, or if there are concerns. And that would be the structure that I would suggest to, and that has worked very well, is to use your group structure and then to get it escalated through the echelons of your group structure into these committees. And if you don't have a representative on those committees with the courts, then you need to establish it within your groups. If, for example, you're an independent from the Bar Council, then you need to establish those committees with the court, the various court structures.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senior Counsel, I've been having my hand up. It seems nobody's recognizing their hands. I'm Haupalelo Molelekwa. I've just graduated. I've never practiced. I'm in another profession, like in the accounting profession.
Yes.
But I'm interested. Just graduated today with my LLM. But your presentation reflects the character of an advocate. I do not have to remind you Senior Counsel about the shenanigans or the happenings in Zondo Commission, what happened in the JSC interviews, where not the individual was interviewed or the individual was in cross-examination or in the Zondo Commission, but the surroundings of the advocate are being questioned. And now you speak, when you speak to us is who are you? Who do you want to become? How should you be? But somebody had to withdraw from JSC just because all of a sudden, out of the blue, they were accused of sexually abusing or an attempt to sexually abuse a colleague. Another one, chances were made zero because all of a sudden their relationship with a friend was questioned. And then there was this question of the top 6, which Judge Motapo spoke to, but you could see and sense the tension in his response when he was asked who is the top 6 in the SCA. So wouldn't you agree with me, Senior Counsel, that all these factors that influence the Judge President Lopez and the Jibas and the Mkwebis, all these factors and all the other, I'm not only focusing now on Black jurists, but or advocates or attorneys, but I'm referring to the profession as a whole, because there are white, colored, and other races who are involved in some one or other activity that is, when they come to JSC where they are, or when they appear in the Zondo Commission or in whichever forum, there's a question of the linkage of their close friends or how they conduct themselves. Wouldn't you say those are those factors as well? One should be able to guide cautiously. I don't know how, but maybe you will assist. Thank you, Senior Counsel.
Haupalelwa, thank you for that question. It's a loaded question, but before I do that, I want to say congratulations on getting your LLM. It is a huge step, and I'm sure that it will serve you well. Yes, the aspect of developing ourselves as jurists, as lawyers, is fundamental. We often, it's a slippery slope. Once people allow, firstly, we are all human. So we all have egos, we all have agendas, and more so people who fall into the scenario of aspects such as politics and aspects such as positions. Both these aspects of politics and positions become areas where they compromise the humanness, the betterness of us as human beings and us as professionals. And when this is seen on the public platform and the public scale, it then gets accepted, and worse still, it gets copied. And these aspects are things that we need to guard against. And the only way I think we can do that is to ensure that there is a level of accountability, there is a level of proper demarcation of powers of people. So, for example, in questions at the JSC, should politics enter the terrain? And if it does, how does it enter? And should aspects such as questioning for one's own benefit be the basis of asking questions? Should people be compromised, without having consideration for the person in front of you, without having a respect for the person in front of you, because you need to prove a point to the public. And so you will compromise that person's integrity simply because you need to win a point. So Tembeka spoke about one thing which I read about. It's not going and lawyering or becoming an advocate or winning a case at any cost. And this must also account for people. You can't firstly allow a loose process, unguided, and if it is guided, then to allow aspects of prejudicial elements coming in without a proper control. So if we had, for example, within these commissions on the questioning, if things went awry, to be able to say, but this is not what this commission is sitting here for. There are guidelines for this commission, and therefore these kind of things that you want to, we understand what your agenda is, and you may want to do it, but this is not the forum to do it in. Then I think we will have gone forward. But that requires a concerted effort as to sitting together and getting people of like mind to ensure that these commissions and the processes are run properly.
Hi, Council. So participants, unfortunately, we're going to have to, this is indeed an informative session, but unfortunately, we're going to have to end it now in lieu of the fact that that few of the participants are Muslim, including Advocate Bava, and it's almost time to break our fast, which is sunset. Accordingly, I'm going to hand it over to Graham to be able to give the final words.
When you get to know me and you ask me, who am I? You will know that it would never be my intention to be offensive. You have said, so when I say this and my words are not that great, will you forgive me because the intentions are good? You have said that we must open ourselves at all stages of our careers. I think that is the most, to learning rather, and never to be arrogant and think that we know everything. I have to tell you, that is one of the most important take-home things that I've got from you tonight. I need to say, in my experience as an advocate, I've always found that there is a huge distinction between cleverness and wisdom. And I have to tell you that what we've heard tonight is wisdom. You've also commented on the fact of the pandemic and how it affects our profession. But one of the immediate problems with doing something by Zoom as we have tonight is that you would be unable to hear the round of applause that people would have given you if we were in a public meeting. So on behalf of the South African Bar Association, I thank you very much for your presentation tonight. We are very grateful for what you've told us tonight, and I'm sure many of us will take it back and implement what your sage advice in our professions from now on. Thank you very much for speaking to us tonight.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Bart.
Thank you, Senior Counsel. You still owe me the response on the top 6. You don't have to respond now. Go and rest on it.
Thank you.
Okay, Senior Counsel.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, sir.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.